personal reflection.
Seeing others.
Wow, I really messed up there.
We see other people the way we want to.
I'm sorry.
Through the experiences we've had with them.
I should have listened.
Through the story.
This self-exploration.
When was the last time that you allowed them to change in your mind?
This willingness to look within ourselves.
Hey there, I'm Reverend Dan. We are Soul Evolution Collaborative, a nonprofit based in universal spiritual principles, offering possibilities for navigating the evolution of life in an authentic and intentional way. And this is Truth Be Told 2.0, a weekly series that is changing the norms, bringing you inspiring and uplifting messages to look at life a little bit different. And so this week, we are reaching the end of this series on vulnerability. And today we are taking a look at how vulnerability impacts community. Specifically, why vulnerability is necessary for creating places of belonging. Everybody needs somewhere to belong. You know, this is something we've talked about, seems like thousands of times. It is literally in our DNA to need somewhere to belong. And as we have found out this month, vulnerability is a necessary step in creating relationships that are required in order to cultivate a sense of belonging. So creating this sense of relationship, belonging, and community begins by allowing ourselves to see others, not as we want to see them, but as they are. It also requires us to allow ourselves to be seen. And so this episode is all about seeing and being seen. So let's sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of Truth Be Told 2.0.
Fostering communities where vulnerability and authenticity is nurtured, it's important to understand the role of personal reflection and responsibility. Now, this sometimes looks like, wow, I really messed up there. Or maybe even, I'm sorry, I should have listened, or I should have communicated that differently. And so a key aspect of vulnerability is this self-exploration, this willingness to look within ourselves and to really be vulnerable enough to ask those questions of ourselves, to explore those things that lay underneath us, underneath the surface of things, and to really begin to get curious about it. And so self-exploration is key. And then self-reflection. Now this looks like maybe asking questions of ourselves and how we show up in communities and how we show up in interactions, and really getting really clear about, are we operating from our values? Are we operating from our authentic selves in those situations? And then it requires some self-shifting. Now that's a word I just made up here on the spot, but self-shifting. Once we explore, once we reflect on those things about ourselves, then we begin to shift and move in ways that are in alignment. And all of this takes a level of vulnerability. A vulnerability to be willing to see life from our own internal perspective. And also a level of vulnerability requires us willing to see life from a wide variety of angles and to understand how our thoughts and our words and our actions can directly impact others. Like we said before, we don't create in a vacuum. And so our own personal thoughts and words and actions have power, not only within our own lives, but within the lives of everyone around us, our interactions, our communities, our groups. And so when we begin to get curious and to see ourselves, then we can understand how we show up in communities and in relationships. We can get really clear about what old frameworks or limiting beliefs or biases are we carrying around on a daily basis that impact how vulnerability can show up in our own lives and how it can show up around us. Are we carrying things that impact our own vulnerability, our own willingness to allow others to show up and be their authentic and vulnerable selves? Are we barriers to the vulnerability of others? Or are we a space that supports the vulnerability and authenticity of those around us? These are some important questions. And this is part of seeing ourselves, allowing us to kind of break free from maybe some of our tendencies to bypass or to push away some of those aspects of ourselves and really ask these key questions. Are we showing up as a space where other people can be vulnerable? Are we looking within our own selves and uncovering biases and limiting beliefs that directly impact not only our own vulnerability, but our ability to show up as a safe space for others? And so this really calls us to an expanded awareness of our connection with the whole, and to explore how intentionally and how through intentionality and through perspective taking and personal reflection, we can serve to bolster a sense of connection and belonging.
While you're here, remember to hit like, subscribe, maybe even drop a comment. We would love to hear from you, and thanks for watching. Just as important in the cultivation of community and a sense of belonging as being seen is seeing others. This may sound kind of obvious, and it might even sound easy. Like, yeah, I do that all the time. But I think you might be surprised just how not simple this might actually be. Mostly, we see other people the way we want to. We see them through the experiences we've had with them. We see them through the filter that we've created for life. We see them through the story that we have kind of made up about life, about that person, about the way that they've been. Maybe it's been one interaction with them, maybe it's been a lifetime of interactions with them, but we have in our mind an ongoing story about that person. And this is true for you also and other people, right? Everybody that you've met has a story, a version of you in their mind. And so that is how we see other people. Think back to somebody you haven't seen in a long time. You think about that person the way you last saw them, the way you thought of them then. So if you haven't seen somebody in 20 years, you are thinking about a 20-year-old version of that person, right? And so maybe this is somebody you know really well in your life. Think about somebody you know really well that you've known for a long time. When was the last time you allowed them to change in your mind? Are they actually the same person now that they were 10, 15, 20 years ago? Think about your family. When was the last time you allowed someone in your family to change in your mind? When was the last time you changed the story about someone in your family? The story that you hold of them. And so we tend to see people based on what makes us comfortable, right? So the stories that we have made up about other people in our lives. And it's not like we're going to not do this. This is just how we're wired. But we tend to make up stories that fit our needs, right? That make us comfortable. And I think this can honestly work in both directions, right? We can hold something against somebody that they did years ago, and maybe it was something they did on a whim. It's not even important to them. They don't even remember, or maybe it was hugely life-changing. It doesn't matter. But we can hold things against people for a really long time. I think it works the other way too, where we can see someone as something that we wish they were, when really they're not yet. It's like seeing the potential of them rather than how they are actually showing up. And I'm trying not to really place judgment on any of this. It's just kind of the way that we are. But we tend to make people into someone that they're not based on our filter. We make them into the version of them that we see or need, or, the version of them that we need in order to justify something about life, or the version of them that we need so that we feel something in life, right? We are making up a story. We're seeing through a lens based on our own stuff, right? And so how we see other people actually becomes this reflection of ourselves, because we see them through the story that we make up. We see them based on what our needs and comforts are and desires are, and not always how they actually are showing up. And so we must learn to see others in a way that is maybe true with a capital T, and also with the lowercase t. We'll get to that in a second. But to truly understand ourselves, we have to be able to see others, and vice versa. For others to truly understand us, we have to let them see us. And so this is not a one-way street. This is a multi-direction intersection of being, I guess. But seeing requires present moment eyes, right? Seeing people with eyes that are able to look at and be aware of the present moment, and not through past filters, right? Not through lenses of judgment or comparison. So we see in this way, we can see with an awareness of what is true with a capital T. Let's see that first. So rather than seeing the story, let us first see what is true with a capital T. And yes, definitely simultaneously not being blind to how life is currently showing up, right? Because there are definitely relationships in our lives that are not great ones. And these are not places of pursuing belonging. And so seeing the capital T truth in someone who's not currently showing up in a way that's beneficial for us, yes, let's hold them in that space of capital T truth, and recognize this is not a great place for us to pursue belonging in this moment, or a sense of connection. And so the switch is, if we see the capital T truth about someone, then we can see the way they're showing up, not attached to our story. We can see it without judgment. We can just see it for what it is, right? We can see each person as this unique expression of the one, of the whole, and see how they're showing up, which is different than seeing as the story, right? Seeing them through our stuff. If we put our stuff aside and see the capital T truth, right? Who they really are, and also with an awareness for how life is showing up, how they're showing up in life, it's a totally different world, totally different perspective. And so seeing others then results in creating communities and spaces of authenticity. When we see with this capital T truth, we're able to create spaces of authenticity, which is messiness and all, in the most perfect way, right? Vulnerability leads then to a healthy perception of our own growth edge, right? Rather than the misperception of flaws that we have been taught. And it allows for a collective navigating of this journey of life, right? We get to enjoy and appreciate the support of others in a healthy way. And honestly, this probably feels like a very far off and new idea for many of us. Kind of as if like this is something brand new, or maybe not even possible. Like, I've never seen that displayed. How does that actually happen? But it is possible to create spaces for belonging that are safe enough, where everyone is aware enough to live not from our story and armor, but from a place of vulnerability that nurtures healthy, safe, and beautiful relationships where there is true belonging.